I'm Toni David. I teach in the Stanislaus Union School District at Agnes Baptist School. I teach 5th grade. I teach a blended 5th grade class, part GATE identified, and a cluster of students who are non-GATE. At the beginning of the lesson, I clarified the intended learning by stating the learning objective, which was to construct a scientific explanation using defining vocabulary in a sentence and focusing on a specific audience for this task. So the task today, I'm going to clarify it again, is we're going to write a scientific explanation to a specific audience using defining vocabulary in our sentences. My students have been exploring Earth systems, specifically water, for a good part of the year. As we've progressed through these lessons, their background knowledge, their evidence, and their reasoning have been pretty well developed. So my students have been learning about some water issues in a fictitious community called East Ferris. So today, the students had to construct an explanation about why it rains. My students work in collaborative groups on a daily basis. We change groups every week. So the groups that they were working in today were set up on a previous day. They have at their hand an idea board. They had their scientific notebooks. They had writing utensils, and then they had an investigation notebook that they had been working on for several weeks now. The students had to collaborate in a group and work on their scientific explanation for why it rains. They had to discuss the concepts together. They had to identify scientific vocabulary that they would like to include in their explanation. So all the groups created a word bank of vocabulary that they had learned from their previous lessons in their hands-on learning and words that they learned in the simulation. When we wrote that first explanation, you wrote it for me because I was going to pick your book up and I was going to read them that night and find out how well our discussion about water shortage went on in the classroom. And normally when you write, the audience you're writing for is Mrs. David. Sometimes with the Peace Essay Contest, we wrote for the community. So today, I want you to think about the focus of this explanation. Because even though East Ferris is a fictitious community, it could be a real community. And community is made up of all kinds of different people. So your explanation is going to a wider audience. The mayor's going to read it, but the community consists of all kinds of different people. So you have to be thinking about this explanation, about how you're going to write this to explain why it rains. How is this audience going to be different than writing to me or to a committee at school? You're writing to a community. So I want you to talk about how this explanation needs to be written for this specific audience. I'm going to give you about 3 minutes. Go.
She knows a little more than maybe like an ordinary person would know, so it makes it so we get to put it in more complex words. So, but since we're writing to the community, we might have to like break it down a little and make it a little easier to understand, so we're not just like using big words so they can't understand it. But not just that, I think we have to go off from the basics and then move up, a little harder explanations as we go up.
You're going to get to today collaborate on this answer. Why does it rain? You're going to get to collaborate. You're going to get to record your thinking on the idea board. You're going to get to write a word bank on your idea board. Together, collaborate and think about what words that we've learned in this unit would be good to use in our scientific explanation. So together, you're going to create your word bank, and then I'm going to show you some examples of sentences that use our vocabulary and sentences that use defining vocabulary. But I'm giving you some brainstorm time because a lot of you are thinking about all this information and processing it, and I think it's important that you put it down on your boards together as a group. So this next piece is going to be a little longer. This collaboration piece is getting your ideas about why it rains down on your whiteboards, jotting down some vocabulary that you think you might want to use in your explanations, and then we're going to come back together and look at the sentences that we might compose in our explanation. Water vapor, engineer, reservoir, evaporation, groundwater, resource, diagram, explanation, synthesis, atmosphere, and molecule. So as the students created their word banks, I demonstrated a sentence on the board using scientific vocabulary, and then I changed that sentence into a defining sentence. So defining a scientific word in the sentence. When students were working collaboratively, it was my job to walk around and to elicit evidence of progress towards this goal. So have we all decided those are the words we're going to use?
We might use more, but we all came up with some.
Okay, perfect.
We might not use like every single one. We might use more than
Exactly. And when it's okay to come up with a list. When you do this independently at the very end, you might decide to use a different set out of this group. Okay. Okay. Get started. Good. So what kinds of things do you need to consider in writing for an audience like that?
Evaporation, condensation, and precipitation.
Ah, okay. So you need to give some scientific terminology. Okay. So keep talking. All right. Okay, but what about your audience? How are they going to understand that? What do you need to do to make that audience understand that concept? How are you going to write this specific to this audience? As I walked around the room, I could see which students were stuck on where to go in explaining why it rains. I saw a lot of nice diagrams as I walked around, but some groups had a really difficult time explaining in writing what was actually happening when it rains. So you just gave me a definition. But in that sentence right there, what do you see? The atmosphere, the air, yes, should shield around Earth makes life possible. So you've got the first part of it. What were you going to say about evaporation? Is it necessary for rain to happen? Do you see what I mean? Okay. All right. Eliciting that evidence prompted me to interpret that many other groups might have had the same difficulties. So as I walked around, I realized that we needed to provide more examples. So I called upon students in different groups. So I'm thinking this is more difficult for us than when we did the example. This may be a little challenge for us to write some defining sentences. So I'm going to ask for some sharing. Is there a group that has a defining sentence other than the one I gave an example with that would like to share that?
Okay, so the word that we defined was precipitation, and we said when water molecules are fully stored in a cloud, it soon falls as precipitation or rain.
Precipitation, or rain. So when the person's reading that sentence and they get to that word precipitation and they're like, oh, where are my context clues? Right after it, right? Oh, it's rain, precipitation, or rain. Oh, they must be one and the same. Do you understand, Michael? Does that make more sense? Does that sound like a good defining sentence?
Yeah.
Tiva.
The main step of a water cycle is evaporation, or when a liquid turns into a gas.
Good. I like that. Evaporation, when a liquid turns into a gas. If you put that comma there. Okay, good. At the end of the lesson, the students had an exit ticket in their investigation notebook. They were to independently write an explanation of why it rains on their own. They were provided about 15 minutes of quiet work time to put their thinking from the collaborative process, from the modeling done in the classroom, from the redirection during the lesson, and put that thinking into their exit ticket. So students really need to be able to communicate their thinking, their ideas, their reasoning behind their ideas, the evidence they have to support their ideas throughout the curriculum, not only in science, but mathematics, in language arts, in social studies. Everywhere across the curriculum, students are called upon to make claims and back them up with reasoning, evidence, and do this in a clear, concise manner. So defining sentences are important in every curricular area. So an important piece in this lesson was the realization from students that this is learning is an ongoing process, and that they use what they know today to enhance what they're going to learn tomorrow. So many of the students had written a previous explanation, and they understood that they had a limited amount of knowledge for that explanation. And as they gather more scientific thinking, as they learn more strategies like writing defining sentences and writing a better explanation, that their learning is an ongoing process and will continue for them in the future. So that's exciting for me as a teacher to know that they understand that learning is a continual process, and that they're excited about that opportunity to learn more.